Welcome to the Case Against Meat Part 3. In this three-part series, we've been making the case against meat, particularly directed to Dr. Jordan Peterson, who has stated that vegans are clueless and has demonized carbohydrates as the cause of America's healthcare woes. Last time, I promised that we would show a gross picture that would turn you off meat forever. This picture was taken by my partner at work a few years ago on Thanksgiving Day when they cut into this turkey and saw this abscess there. This apparently is not uncommon to have abscesses in butchered poultry and beef. And also, it's not that uncommon to find worms in a grocery store fish. This is enough in itself to turn me off of meat and fish. I don't know about you, but I really don't ever want to eat meat or fish again. Now, I concede to Dr. Peterson on issues of psychology and philosophy. I have a lot of respect for his views on these things. But when it comes to lifestyle medicine issues, I really don't think he knows what he's talking about. And just to circle back to the last video, I had a discussion about carbohydrates and differentiated between healthy carbohydrates and unhealthy carbohydrates. He's mistakenly stated that Americans have increased the number of carbohydrates that they're eating and decreased the percentage of fat that they're eating. It's not quite true. Dr. Dean Ornish looked at the figures from the US government, and Americans are eating, in fact, more fat than ever and more carbohydrates, unhealthy carbohydrates. As a percentage, the percentage of fat that Americans are eating has decreased slightly, but the total has gone up. And therefore, Dr. Peterson's assertion that Americans are eating a low-fat diet is actually not true. Now, autoimmunity is another problem with eating meat and animal products in general. The best worked out example is that for dairy. Now, what happens when children are exposed to dairy at a young age is that the milk proteins are not perfectly digested when they're absorbed into the system. The body recognizes them as a foreign invader and develops antibodies towards these milk proteins. And these milk protein antibodies then cross-react with the beta cells in the pancreas, which are the insulin-producing cells. A reaction is set up where the body attacks these beta cells. The child loses the ability to produce insulin and becomes a type 1 diabetic. This process is called molecular mimicry, and there's probably a similar process going on with other autoimmune diseases like hypothyroidism and systemic lupus erythematosus. Other autoimmune diseases include multiple sclerosis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, and Graves' disease, amongst many others. The research done by Dr. T. Colin Campbell is really quite fascinating and was instrumental in convincing me to avoid eating animal protein. Many years ago, he was a bench researcher looking to contribute to the scientific body of information as to how to feed the world when starvation was a problem, and it still is to some degree. He was studying rodents and inducing cancers in these rodents and feeding them various quantities of animal protein, specifically casein, which is the main milk protein. The expectation was that the more casein in their diet, the more protected that they would be towards cancer. And they found the exact opposite. The more casein in the diet, the more vulnerable the rats were to cancer. And in fact, they spun the experiments with many different designs and came to the same conclusion, is that the casein was actually instrumental in causing and promoting cancer. And in fact, all stages of cancer development were found to be worsened by the presence of casein. And those include initiation, promotion, progression, and metastases. Similar results were found with other animal proteins too. Subsequent research by Dr. Colin Campbell showed that also not only was animal protein facilitating the development and progression of cancer, it also inhibited all of the known defense mechanisms against cancer. Now, you could say, well, rodents are rodents and we're human beings. You can't really extrapolate from that. After many years of bench research on animal protein and finding the surprise result that animal protein actually increased the problems of cancer, he then got involved with the China study, which was a huge study done in collaboration with the Chinese government, Cornell University, and Oxford University. And what they did is they went around China to, I believe it was 65 different counties across the country, and actually went into people's homes and studied what they ate. And they also studied the death records locally to see what it was that people were dying from in these different areas. Now, at that particular time, the Chinese population was not particularly mobile, and people were not moving from county to county. The average Chinese person at the time was only consuming 0.8% of their calories from animal protein, as opposed to Americans consuming 11% of their calories from animal protein. In other words, the Americans were consuming 13 times as much as the average Chinese. Now, amongst the Chinese, there was actually a range. Some of these counties were quite impoverished and didn't have access to animal protein, were not consuming any. Some were consuming quite a bit more. But on average, it was 0.8% of their calories. So the Americans were on average consuming 13 times as much percentage of their calories from animal protein compared to Chinese, which should be very alarming. What Dr. Campbell's team found was there was a direct proportionality between chronic diseases like cancer and the percentage of animal protein in their diet. Now, just think of Americans eating 13 times as much animal protein as the Chinese were on average. And it's no wonder that we have such a sickly population. It's also interesting that within a small spectrum on the range of protein intakes among the Chinese, there were very striking and noticeable differences in the disease rates. The standard American diet actually has a very direct and immediate effect upon blood flow in our body. Facilitating the production of nitric oxide is one of the virtues of eating a lot of dark green leafy vegetables. It's amazing, but things like kale and collard greens and spinach in the short term improve the production of nitric oxide, which facilitates blood flow and actually can improve erectile function. The point being, in the context of this presentation of the case against meat, being that if you want to have good blood flow to your penis, you've got to avoid animal products and maximize plant products. Now, often it's thought that plant-based vegan diets are not manly, but the opposite is true. You're going to have better blood flow to your penis if you eat a plant-based diet. And furthermore, testosterone levels are higher in vegan men than they are in meat-eating men. And one reason for that is because conventionally produced meat, they make the animals grow quicker and fatter by giving them female hormones. Those female hormones get in your body and then raise the female hormones in your body and suppress your testosterone production. So the idea that eating meat is manly is just completely false. One objection to eating a plant-based diet is the concern that by eating more plants, you're going to consume more organic pollutants such as pesticides. Actually, the opposite is true, because when you eat a meat-based diet, the animals are eating vegetation and then concentrate the organic pollutants in their flesh. So you actually get more organic pollutants by eating a meat-based diet than a plant-based diet, even if it's not organic produce that you're buying. Always eat your vegetables, even if you can't afford to buy organic. You're still going to be further ahead. Studies have shown that plant-based eaters may have as little as 1% of the organic pollutants in their flesh that meat eaters do. Polyaromatic hydrocarbons and heterocyclic amines are compounds that you get mostly from eating cooked animal flesh. The percentage that you get from eating vegetables is very trivial. These compounds are involved in cancer, Alzheimer's disease, strokes, and aging. Advanced glycation end products are also consumed by eating cooked meat. An example of an advanced glycation end product is hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker of blood sugar control over the previous 90 days. What happens is these sugars bind to proteins in the meat. These are implicated in Alzheimer's, strokes, and aging in general. Eating meat has been tied to sundry common diseases. These include gout, fatty liver, male and female infertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome, diverticulosis, diverticulitis, appendicitis, gallbladder disease, kidney failure, kidney stones, inflammatory arthritis, amongst others. These are common everyday diseases that I see in my practice as a radiologist over and over and over again. In fact, as a radiologist, foodborne illness is so common, I don't go a single hour without seeing some form of foodborne illness on a CT scan. That may include atherosclerotic plaque, fatty liver, gallstones, kidney stones, diverticulosis, diverticulitis, and other such common diseases. The advocates of a meat-based diet don't understand that anatomically we're really not designed to eat meat. First of all, we have stereoscopic color vision, which we probably have to pick out colorful plant matter in the distance. We have a jaw that moves from side to side for grinding vegetation, as opposed to a carnivorous jaw, which is more like garden shears or scissors for cutting and slicing. We do have canines, which are common in the animal kingdom, and many people say, oh, that's proof that we're supposed to be eating meat. But really, you're going to go out there in the wild and run down an animal and pin them with these puny little canines? I don't think so. And in fact, the largest canines in the animal kingdom belong to hippopotami, which are pure herbivorous animals. We have a small oropharynx and esophagus, and the most common cause of choking death is from eating meat. We are really not meant to be eat meat like a dog or a wolf. Our stomach acid is not very acidic compared to a carnivore. A carnivore can eat meat that has bacteria on it, and the stomach acid is sufficient to kill the bacteria. Carnivores have a stomach acid that's in the order of 100 to 1,000 times more acidic than ours. And so we're really not meant to be eating potentially decaying flesh. We have a long small bowel and colon designed for extracting nutrients from plants. Animals that are carnivorous have short small bowels and colons to push things through quickly before they cause too much damage. And just look at us physically. We're not very strong. We're not very fast. We're really not designed to get into a physical fight with another animal. All these things together point to the fact that we're really designed to eat plants. We're not really designed to eat animals. All of these negative physiological processes that occur from eating meat still hold true even if the meat is free-range and organic. The only thing that would be a little bit different from a physiological point of view regarding free-range organic meat, or like wild game, is the percentage of fat would be lower. And also the composition of the fatty acids would be a little bit different. But all of these other things that I've raised, from polyaromatic hydrocarbons to heme iron to even excessive calorie density, all hold true whether it's conventionally raised meat in a factory farm or free-range organic meat. It's not like these issues suddenly disappear just because the meat is free-range and organic. Now, there are environmental concerns around animal agriculture. The biggest concern that people frequently talk about is global warming. Even if you dismiss the idea that global warming is due to human activity, there's still many other issues in the environment that are greatly exacerbated by animal-based diet. Animal habitat loss is largely driven by animal agriculture, and in fact, it's the number one reason where we're losing the rainforest in the Amazon. It's to cut down trees to graze animals. They cut down the trees, graze the animals, turn the area into a desert, so then they need to cut down more trees to graze the animals so that they can raise beef for the world market. Animal agriculture is the number one cause of land erosion due to cutting down trees. It's the number one cause of desertification. It's the number one cause of the depletion of the natural aquifers. And all of the pesticides and herbicides used in animal agriculture get into the runoff and are the main cause of the ocean dead zones. Animal agriculture is incredibly polluting. As an example, 2,500 cows produces the same amount of sewage as a city of 411,000 people. Vegans only require 1/18 of the landmass to be fed, and so their environmental strain is far less than that of those eating meat. Now, there's issues around animal cruelty. For some reason, we treat dogs and cats like little princes and princesses, but then we have this arbitrary distinction that some animals are not worth compassion at all. We arbitrarily treat dogs and cats really well and actually would send someone to prison that abuses a dog or a cat. But abuse is industry standard when it comes to pigs and cows and chickens. We would be outraged if we saw a dog beaten, and yet pigs and cows and chickens are abused all of the time. Somehow that's okay. A pig can be as intelligent as a 3-year-old child, and yet we think nothing of a pig being abused. Now, I would say that the main issue is not really even intelligence, it's actually sentience. Do these people have concern? Do these animals have concern for their own lives? And do they feel pain? And the answer is yes. And given that I have demonstrated that we really don't need to eat these animal products, it becomes completely unnecessary. It's not like this is a necessary part of our physiology to eat animal products. It's not. It harms us as individuals, and it harms us collectively by the damage done to the environment. And so, given that it's completely unnecessary, we shouldn't be abusing animals. I just can't fathom how it can be justified just because you like the taste of a bacon cheeseburger. Now, I agree with Dr. Peterson that coercion should not be used to change people's eating habits. I 100% agree with that. I think morally it makes more sense to convince and persuade people. I would not be in favor of any kind of a government mandate to stop people from eating meat. I would be in favor of removing subsidies for the production of meat and junk food, and just let the marketplace figure it out. And as time people get more educated and realize that they're better off to not eat meat. Another thing that would be helpful is that people would have direct skin in the game regarding their own healthcare costs and realize that if they can keep themselves healthy, they would bear the benefits of a lower healthcare costs. That's a huge topic in and of itself, and I'm not going to go down that path right now. Now, Dr. Peterson has made the claim that a vegan diet is a boring diet. That's what I would have thought too a few years ago. The lowest estimate of the number of edible plant foods that I've read is 80,000. The highest is 300,000. Let's assume that there's only 80,000 edible plant foods. A meal of 2 different plant foods yields 6.4 billion meal possibilities. The possibilities are endless. We've got shelves full of vegan cookbooks that we'll never get through, and the food is amazing. True, there is a change that has to occur where you start to appreciate the flavor of plant food. Initially, it may seem a little bit bland because the typical American is used to the Western diet that is loaded with fat, oil, and sugar, which just blasts taste. Once you get away from the fat, oil, and sugar, and your taste buds change, and the neural reward pathways in your brain change, you'll start to appreciate the nuances in the flavor of plants. I remember one day a few years ago, I came home and I was really hungry, and there was some cold steamed broccoli just sitting on the counter, nothing on it, and I wolfed it down, and I was amazed at how flavorful it was. I actually think that once you get used to a whole food, plant-based vegan diet, the range of flavors that you can appreciate and enjoy is actually far greater. So the idea that it's a bland diet, it's just not true. Well, Dr. Peterson, this wraps up our series on the case against meat. I don't think I've covered every issue, but there's an awful lot of issues that you would have to address to prove me wrong that meat is not a necessary part of the human diet. Please like and subscribe and post your comments below. We're really interested to see what you think.